Doris (Dorie) Miller was a Messman Third Class that the United States Navy noted for his bravery during the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. He was the first African American to be awarded the Navy Cross, the third highest honor awarded by the U.S.Navy at the time, after the Medal of Honor and the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. The Navy Cross now precedes the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. Miller's acts were heavily publicized in the black press, making him the iconic emblem of the war for blacks, and was their #1 hero, and so energized black support for the war effort against a colored Japanese enemy. Nearly 2 years after Pearl Harbor, he was killed in action when Usliscombe Bay was sunk by a Japanese submarine during the Battle of Macon. Early life and education. Miller was born in Waco, Texas, on October 12, 1919, to Connery and Henrietta Miller. He was the third of 4 sons and helped around the house, cooking meals and doing laundry, as well as working on the family farm. Miller was a good student and was a fullback on the football team at Waco's Ymca High School. On January 25, 1937, at age 17, he began attending the 8th grade again. Forced to repeat the grade the following year, Miller decided to drop out of school. He filled his time squirrel hunting with a .22 rifle and completed a correspondence course in taxidermy. Miller applied to join the Civilian Conservation Corps, but was not accepted. At the time he was 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighed more than 200 pounds. Miller worked on his father's farm until shortly before his 20th birthday. On September 16, 1939, he enlisted in the United States Navy, where he became a mess attendant, 3rd class, one of the few ratings then open to African Americans. Following training at the Naval Training Station, Norfolk, Virginia, he was assigned to the ammunition ship Pyro, but on January 2, 1940, was transferred to the battleship West Virginia, where he became the main cook. In July, he was on temporary duty on the Nevada at the Secondary Battery Gunnery School. He returned to his ship in August and was promoted to ship's cook, 3rd class. Miller's nickname, Dorie, apparently originated in a typographical error. After he was nominated for recognition for his actions on December 7, 1941, the Pittsburgh Courier released a story on March 14, 1942, that gave his name as Dorie Miller. Since then, some writers have suggested it was a nickname to shipmates and friends. Career. Attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Miller awoke at 06:00. After serving breakfast mess, he was collecting laundry when at 07:57 Lieutenant Commander Shigeharu Murata from the Japanese carrier Akagi launched the first of 9 torpedoes that would hit the West Virginia. When the battle station's alarm went off, Miller headed for his battle station, an anti-aircraft battery magazine amidship, only to discover that a torpedo had destroyed it. He went then to Times Square, a central spot where the fore to aft and port to starboard passageways crossed, and reported himself available for other duty. Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Johnson, the ship's communications officer, spotted Miller and saw the potential of his powerful bill, and ordered him to accompany him to the bridge to assist with moving the ship's captain, Mervyn Benyon, who had a gaping wound in his abdomen, where he had apparently been hit by shrapnel. Miller and another sailor lifted the skipper and, unable to remove him from the bridge, carried him from his exposed position on the damaged bridge to a sheltered spot behind the conning tower. The captain refused to leave his post, questioned his officers about the condition of the ship, and gave orders. Lieutenant Frederick H. White ordered Miller to help him and Ensign Victor Delano load the unmanned No. 1 and No. 2 Browning 50-caliber anti-aircraft machine guns after the conning tower. Miller was not familiar with the machine gun, but White and Delano told him what to do. Miller had served both men as a room steward and knew them well. Delano expected Miller to feed ammunition to one gun, but his attention was diverted, and when he looked again, Miller was firing one of the guns. White had loaded ammunition into both guns and assigned Miller the starboard gun. Miller fired the gun until he ran out of ammunition, when he was ordered by Lieutenant Claude V. Ricketts, along with Lieutenant White and Chief Signalman A. Seward, to help carry the captain up to the navigation bridge out of the thick oily smoke generated by the many fires on and around the ship. Benyon was only partially conscious at this point, and died soon afterward. Japanese aircraft eventually dropped 2 armor-piercing bombs through the deck of the battleship and launched 5 18-in aircraft torpedoes into her port side. When the attack finally lessened, Miller helped move injured sailors through oil and water to the quarterdeck, thereby unquestionably saving the lives of a number of people who might otherwise have been lost. The ship was heavily damaged by bombs, torpedoes and resulting explosions and fires, but the crew prevented her from capsizing by counter-flooding a number of compartments. Instead, the West Virginia sank to the harbor bottom as her surviving crew, including Miller, abandoned ship. Commendation on December 15. Miller was transferred to the Indianapolis. On January 1, 1942, the Navy released a list of commendations for actions on December 7. Among them was a single commendation for an unnamed Negro. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People asked President Franklin D. Roosevelt to award the Distinguished Service Cross to the unknown Negro sailor. The Navy Board of Awards in Washington, D.C., received a recommendation that the sailor be considered for recognition. On March 12, 1942, Dr. Lawrence D. Reddick announced, after corresponding with the Navy, that the name of the unknown Negro sailor was Doris Miller. The next day, Senator James M. Meade introduced a Senate bill to award Miller the Medal of Honor, but he did not yet know the basis for Miller's deeds. 4 days later, Representative John D. Dingell, Sr. introduced a matching bill. On March 21, the African-American newspaper Pittsburgh Courier initiated a write-in campaign to send Miller to the Naval Academy. Miller was recognized as one of the first U.S. heroes of World War II. Quote, he was commended in a letter signed by Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox on April 1, and the next day, CBS Radio broadcast an episode of the series, They Live Forever, which dramatized Miller's actions. Negro organizations began a campaign to give Miller additional recognition. The All-Southern Negro Youth Conference launched a signature campaign on April 17 to 19. On May 10, the National Negro Congress denounced Knox's recommendation against awarding Miller the Medal of Honor. On May 11, President Franklin D. Roosevelt approved the Navy Cross for Miller. On May 27, 1942, Miller was personally recognized by Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Fleet, aboard the aircraft carrier Enterprise. Nimitz presented Miller with the Navy Cross, at the time the third highest Navy award for gallantry during combat. The citation reads as follows: for distinguished devotion to duty, extraordinary courage and disregard for his own personal safety during the attack on the fleet in Pearl Harbor, Territory of Hawaii, by Japanese forces on December 7, 1941. While at the side of his captain on the bridge, Miller, despite enemy strafing and bombing and in the face of a serious fire, assisted in moving his captain, who had been mortally wounded, to a place of greater safety, and later manned and operated a machine gun directed at enemy Japanese attacking aircraft until ordered to leave the bridge. Nimitz said of Miller's commendation, "This marks the first time in this conflict that such high tribute has been made in the Pacific Fleet to a member of his race, and I'm sure that the future will see others similarly honored for brave acts." World War II service. Miller was promoted to mess attendant first class on June 1, 1942. On June 27, the Pittsburgh Courier called for Miller to be allowed to return home for a war bond tour like white heroes. On November 23, Miller returned to Pearl Harbor and was ordered on a war bond tour while he was still attached to the heavy cruiser Indianapolis. In December 1942 and January 1943, he gave talks in Oakland, California, in his hometown of Waco, Texas, in Dallas, and the first graduating class of black sailors from Great Lakes Naval Training Station, Chicago. In its February 6, 1943 issue, the Pittsburgh Courier continued to hammer to return Miller for a war bond tour. The caption to Miller's photo in the article read, "He fought, Keeps Mop, and another hero of the Pearl Harbor attack received an officer's commission." It said that Miller was two important waiting tables in the Pacific to return him, even though in fact he was already on tour. Miller reported for duty at Puget Sound Navy Yard on May 15, 1943. He was made a petty officer, ship's cook third class, on June 1 when he reported to the escort carrier Liscum Bay. After training in Hawaii, the Liscum Bay took part in the Battle of Macon Island beginning November 20, 1943. On November 24, the ship was struck in the stern by a torpedo from the Japanese submarine I-175. The aircraft bomb magazine detonated a few moments later, causing the ship to sink within minutes. There were 272 survivors from the crew of over 900, but Miller was not among them. Along with two-thirds of the crew, he was listed as presumed dead. On December 7, 1943, 2 years after Miller's heroic actions at Pearl Harbor, his parents were informed that the son was missing in action. A memorial service was held on April 30, 1944, at the Waco, Texas, Second Baptist Church, sponsored by the Victory Club. On May 28, a granite marker was dedicated at Moore High School to honor Doris Miller. On November 25, Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal announced to the public that Miller was presumed dead. Awards and decorations, medals and ribbons. Legacy. U.S. Miller, a Knox-class frigate, was commissioned on June 30, 1973 in honor of Miller. The Doris Miller Foundation was founded in 1947 to give an annual award to the individual or group considered outstanding in the field of race relations. Doris Miller Memorial, planned $1.35 million public art installation honoring Miller, Waco, Texas. Bledsoe Miller Community Center, recreation facility in Waco, Texas, jointly named for Jules Bledsoe. Doris Miller Department of Veterans Affairs Medical Center, Waco, Texas, includes monument dedicated to Miller and a road named Doris Miller Drive. Doris Miller Memorial Park, a cemetery outside of Waco in Belmead, Texas, where Miller is buried. Doris Miller YMCA, Waco, Texas. Doris Miller Elementary School, Waco, Texas. Dorie Miller Center, a former shopping center in San Antonio, Texas. Dorie Miller Houses Housing Cooperative Complex built in 1953 in Corona, New York. Dorie Miller Housing Project Housing Community in Gary, Indiana. Dorie Miller Intermediate School in Ennis, Texas. Doris Miller Elementary School, San Antonio, Texas. Doris Miller Elementary School, San Diego, California. Doris Miller Junior High School, San Marcos, Texas. Doris Miller Auditorium, Austin, Texas. Doris Miller Community Center, Recreation Facility in Newport News, Virginia. Doris Miller Park, a housing community for junior officers at Maui. Doris Miller Park, a housing community for junior enlisted in Honolulu, Hawaii. Dorie Miller Galley, the main galley for Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti. Doris Miller Post 915, an American Legion post in Chicago. Dorie E. Miller Post 817, Beaumont, Texas. Dorie Miller American Legion Chapter 14, a disabled American veterans chapter located in Washington, D.C. On October 11, 1991, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority dedicated a bronze commemorative plaque of Miller at the Miller Family Park located on the U.S. Naval base at Pearl Harbor. Dorie Miller Park, Lewisburg, West Virginia. Dorie Miller Drive, Champaign, Illinois. Doris Miller Loop, Honolulu, Hawaii. Monument located at north end of Street. Doris Miller Dining Hall, USN Great Lakes Recruit Training Center, Great Lakes, Illinois. Distinguished Sailor, honored by the U.S. Postal Service as one of 4 distinguished sailors, with a 44-cent commemorative stamp issued on February 4, 2010. The Bachelor Enlisted Quarters at Great Lakes Naval Base was dedicated to Miller's memory on December 7, 1971. In 2002, Melfi Asante listed Doris Miller on his list of 100 greatest African Americans.